The fundamental question is, why was Dr. Fauci so consumed with making sure the narrative wasn't about the lab? I think it's because they were doing gain-of-function research there. He didn't want that out. And that was the narrative that everyone on the left bought into, even though the facts and common sense, maybe most importantly, pointed to the lab leak theory.
And Congressman Jordan says he intends to prove just that. So what did Fauci know, and when did he know it? Let's break it down with our Monday Man panel. We've got former Trump Advisory Board member and Hoteling Risk Advisors Managing Director Jason Meister is back, along with Democrat strategist, former Biden campaign surrogate. I got to hug him tonight. His name is Kevin Walling. I sure did, and I liked it. And senior editor at Reason, one of our very favorites, Robby Soave. He's rounding things out beautifully. All right, gentlemen, let's discuss. This is totally unsurprising. It is completely unacceptable. And I have a feeling when Chinese doctors started sending out alarm signals and dying, that Fauci knew exactly what had happened back in November of 2019. Jason?
Yeah, look, Kennedy, I think anyone with a functioning brain knew that day one, this most likely came out of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. That's precisely why Dr. Fauci worked overtime to conceal his funding of gain-of-function research at the Wuhan lab. And then he went on to covertly prompt scientists to knowingly fabricate the origins of COVID by commissioning and approving the proximal origin paper. And then he took that paper and he cited it repeatedly in the press as an independent news source. That's exactly how Dr. Fauci simultaneously manipulated the origins of COVID debate while also covering up what I consider his crimes against humanity.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any other way of describing that, because Kevin, Dr. Fauci has anointed himself as the greatest knower of all viruses, allergies, and infectious diseases on the planet. That's how he's been in power for so long. So knowing what he's known, granting what he has granted, laundering money the way he has, he is culpable here.
Well, Kennedy, I think it's important that Anthony Fauci come before Congress and to testify before House GOP committees, whether it be oversight, whether it be the Select Committee on China. He has said in the past that he will do that. And I think as we learn more about the origins and this, President Biden commissioned back in 2021 all of our intelligence agencies to run their own independent assessments. This one that came back in terms of the lab leak was from the Department of Energy. There's a few others that have said that it's still this natural progression. I tend to think now more that it is this lab leak. And let's get to the bottom of this. And the real enemy in all of this is the Chinese Communist Party. It's not Tony Fauci. It's not Americans that were at war with themselves during COVID. It is the Chinese Communist Party that we need to keep a focus on.
I'm going to push back a little bit there, Kevin. I agree with you about the culpability of the Communist Chinese government. There's no doubt about that. They destroyed samples. They did not allow scientists to go into the caves where...
Still to this point, to this time.
Absolutely right. Having said that, Dr. Fauci provided cover for the Communist Chinese government and continues to do so to this day. In fact, one of the people, Jeremy Farrar, who was one of the co-authors of that proximal origin study, he has had a lovely gilded path to power. In fact, is now the chief scientist at the World Health Organization and was appointed so in December of last year. So people who went along with Dr. Fauci and carried his water, they were promoted, they were given grants, and they were shielded from accountability. Meanwhile, we've known all along that the natural origin theory was pretty much hogwash, and Dr. Fauci had so much at stake, didn't he, Robby?
That's exactly it. Let's be clear about what Dr. Fauci did. He tipped the scales of debate very decisively against the lab leak theory, and because he was so against it, the mainstream media and other government health advisors, they called you a racist conspiracy theorist for thinking we should still look into whether it was a lab leak. You were not allowed to discuss this theory on Facebook because of the certainty coming from Dr. Fauci and those like him. Think about how ridiculous that is, that people were called racist conspiracy theorists because they thought it might have come out of a lab. It doesn't even make any sense, because the alternative explanation that this has to do with the unique weekly Chinese animal eating practices, that's what caused this pandemic. I'm sorry, that's a much more racially problematic theory than the theory that it emerged from a lab with, by the way, with funding from the U.S. government. This is the anti-racist theory. This is the theory where the blame has to do with people in power in China and in the U.S., including Dr. Fauci. No wonder he didn't want it looked at too closely.
No, and they laundered that money through the EcoHealth Alliance, who gave millions of dollars to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, who was doing, the exact type of research. Kevin, to your point, Dr. Fauci has denied that. He has already perjured himself before Congress. So I would love to see him go back, and I would love to see him do time, which would be a nice comeuppance for people who have lost family members, in large part due to his lies.